All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is McCain Vogel. I am the associate editor here at No-Till Farmer. I just want to say thanks for joining us today for the webinar with BW Fusion titled Turn Residue into Revenue with Meltdown. So this presentation is going to feature BW Fusion agronomist Sean Nettleton, who has an expertise in soil biology, nutrient management, and residue breakdown, which makes him the perfect advocate for integrating biological products like Meltdown into modern farming practices. So this should be a great webinar. Before we get started, just have a couple of housekeeping items. So reminder that there is a Q&A panel or a Q&A icon rather on the bottom panel of your screen there. So you can use that to submit questions all throughout the presentation, and we'll save those for the end and try to get to as many as possible after Sean's presentation's over. And then just one final reminder too, that the session is being recorded. So the event you want to go back and watch it or share with anyone, usually that becomes available to you about 48 hours after the conclusion today. So I think that's all I have for you guys. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Sean.
Thanks, McCain. Glad to be here. And let's dive in. Let's talk about residue degradation with Meltdown. So, as McCain said, my name's Sean Nettleton. I'm a technical agronomist here at BW Fusion. I live in Southeast Illinois, so I cover an area, basically Wisconsin down into the Mississippi Delta. So that's what I do here. So, I think the first thing we need to do anytime when you start out something like this, it's best to probably talk a little bit about who BW Fusion is and kind of what we're all about. So BW Fusion was formed in 2019. I think this paragraph says a lot. It's boldly challenging conventional agronomy and revolutionizing the ag industry. So we do a lot of innovation and education. That's kind of what we hang our hat on is trying to bring innovative and educational material to our customers to expose the truth and set a new standard to improve soil resiliency and profitability. And I think that's important. This revolutionizing challenging conventional agronomy and revolutionizing the ag industry is, I think there's a lot of, from what we see, there's a lot of opportunity to think about things a little bit differently. Think about things outside the box of traditional. At times I've said I'm a recovering traditional agronomist because I think there's a lot of things that we look at now and we look at them in a different lens than maybe we once did. So some things about us: we're family owned. So BW Fusion was formed as a joint venture between Biodyne, which was a world known biological company, and Wells Ag Supply, based out of Northwest Iowa. We manufacture our own products. We bring results by data driven that's powered by our Agronomy 365 platform. We feel like we're grower first. Again, we lead on that education and that last tagline, the future of crop nutrition. And I feel strongly about that because, what we're trying to do is change the way we conventionally think about fertilizing and managing a crop. So, and there's me, like I said, technical agronomist at BW Fusion. And so let's talk about Meltdown. There's some different challenges that we face. Obviously, we're entering a period now to do more with less, and we think about residue management, especially in the face of corn. One of the struggles that we've faced, for probably the last 15 or 20 years, as long as I've been in the industry, is what do we do with all this residue as our corn yields improve, right? And we talk about this a lot kind of internally. We had a group of dealers in yesterday to our offices in Fort Wayne. And we always talk about this, when our first guys started selling, from the biological side back in the early, 10, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that, going out and talking to farmers about this Meltdown piece, all they really had to go on was, hey, Mr. Farmer, we're going to save your tractor tires. We're going to save wear and tear on equipment. And sometimes we joke about that, but at the same time, that is real. You drive through a field of corn stalks, that those things with the breeding enhancements and the yield increases that we have with that crop, especially, that those stalks are tough, and they're hard to break down. And in a lot of environments, we still see, that residue come spring, and it creates some planting issues in the spring. Pair that with tied up nutrients. So, with fertility prices doing what they're doing going into the 25 season, paired with commodity prices doing what they're doing, there's a lot of nutrients tied up in that. And with nutrients being tied up in that residue, we're tying up money. So let's break that down quicker. And obviously, you hate to use the government scare tactic card, but there's no doubt that there's things that are happening, in our industry where the government is looking at all the different things that we're doing, and challenging traditional ag methods, and so kind of leads us to search for new ways to do things somewhat differently here. So, I feel like Meltdown's a heck of a solution here. So, Iowa State study says that crop residue holds, 70 pounds of N, 20 pounds of P, and 140 pounds of K. I was looking back, the International Plant Nutrition Institute has an app for fertilizer removal, and I was looking at some of that myself. If you look at a 200 bushel corn crop, and a lot of us are growing, more than 200 bushel in a lot of places, at 200 bushel, there's 70 pounds of DAP and 300 plus pounds of potash in this corn residue, not to mention, maybe 70 to 90 pounds of nitrogen. So if we break down that residue and return that back to the soil, can we put that nutrition, from that residue into next year's cropping budget? And again, had a group of growers or a group of dealers in yesterday, and I asked them this question as I prepare for this webinar. I said, when you guys are making fertility recommendations for your customers, are you taking in account that nutrition that's held up in that residue? And I think it was kind of an overwhelming agreement that they don't, because they don't know the release rates. They don't know the release timings. And I think that's something that we can help with. If we can give a lot of that nutrition back, we can use those dollars and use those nutrients going into that 25 season. So, we're reclaiming that money you've invested, and an undigested residue is dollars that are tied up. So how does Meltdown work? What does it do? I guess, what is a meltdown? And I think this graphic does a good job of kind of giving us some talking points to walk through here. Meltdown is essentially naturally occurring microbes and other biostimulant technologies that begin breaking down residue. Guys, we've got, a consortium of biology here that are going and doing different things, in that crop residue. We've got strains of biology that are breaking down that waxy cuticle layer that's on that residue. We've got strains of biology, that are going in there and feeding on that complex carbon of that residue. So, breaking down the cellulose and the lignin from those corn stalks. So, breaking down that white pith material that tends to hold moisture, tends to get ropey the longer it's there. It's kind of like, I was telling these guys that it's an army of different specialties is what it is, right? Because, each strain of biology kind of has a job, so I think about it with those biostimulant technologies, it's like a top down and a bottom up approach, so, we're not discounting the native biology that's already in our soils that will already aid in the breakdown of residue. But I think anybody, that's watching here that farms would agree that yes, we want to stimulate native biology, but that breakdown of that residue is slow. And we're still dealing with that in a lot of environments, the following spring. So, and the other thing that I say a lot of times is if you take and your corn head's going through a field and you're taking that residue off at about 18 inches above the ground, for a microbe from the soil to get to the top to work its way back down, it's going to take a lot of rain, a lot of splashing. It'd be like, you or I trying to climb Mount Everest, right? To get to the top, to get in there to start working down. So, that top-down approach is when we apply that biology to that residue, we've got an army of microbes that are working where they land and colonizing that entire bit of residue. And then we also get some benefit from our friends in the soil. And so once that residue breakdown begins to happen, that step two is, the carbon potassium, phosphorus, nitrogen, all the nutrients that are in that residue start to be released back to the soil. I don't want to simply skim over the carbon piece. It's one of the biggest things. It's what Meltdown does, is it breaks down those complex carbons, turns them into simple carbons, and those simple carbons is what the microbes in the soil and the microbes that we apply are going to use for a food source to continue the nutrient release from the residue, and also continue start to find that soil for nutrient release from that soil as well. So carbon is obviously a hot topic in the news these days. I'll be honest with you, one of the things I love most about Meltdown is the fact that we're creating a food source. We're creating available carbon in our soil systems because to be honest with you, what we measure as WEOC through Agronomy 365, water extractable organic carbon, to be quite honest with you, our soils are depleted of carbon, and we need more carbon because it is really the lifeblood of our soils. It's the food. It's the thing that stimulates the microbes in our soil to get them to working for us to release nutrients back for us. And from there, obviously, once we have those nutrients in the soil, those nutrients can fuel future crops, and again, allow us to spend less money on cropping inputs the following season and getting that soil, back alive and cycling and providing nutrients back to the succeeding crops. So I love this slide. You'll see, feel, and hear the Meltdown difference. And you can see from this picture the before Meltdown, like I talked about, that white pith, that cellulose from that corn stalk especially. That's not to say that we can't see benefits and that we won't see benefits if you go into a soybean crop or you go behind, a wheat crop or something else. But the visuals are really, can be in that corn crop because that's the thing that really has, the most amount of that cellulose, the most amount of that carbon that's getting broke down. So over time, as those microbes get into that stalk, you can see how that cellulose material is disappearing. So a question that we get asked a lot, some folks are concerned about blowing and about the residue going away completely. And a lot of times what you'll see is that cellulose material is gone from the center, but that kind of that thicker rind, still remains in the field. But when we come through there with next year's planter or next year's tillage pass, that residue just breaks up and kind of just comes apart. So I think that's a big one. So we can watch as residue starts to break down. The first sign of effectiveness is the dulling of the waxy sheen on those stalks. And if you remember in that last slide, I mentioned that first round of those microbes are going to break down that waxy cuticle to allow the other teams of biology to get into that stalk and do its worth. And then in a few months, you'll easily crush residue in your hands. I mean, this is a see, feel, and touch type deal, right? I'm going to tell you that if you apply a Meltdown to a farm and you drive by there every 2 weeks and you're expecting to see, a difference from 50 miles an hour, unfortunately, we're probably not going to see that. But if you get out there in the field and you drive through the field, you walk through the field, there's a video. We bring this up. One of our original reps, it's kind of I think it's the karate video we call it. And he's going through there and he's kicking stalks in the next spring after a Meltdown application, and those stalks are just blowing away and just knocking down real easy. When you're in the tractor cab, it's much quieter when you're not running through tough residue. This is the thing that stands out to a lot of people. Matter of fact, I was interviewing a new dealer in South Dakota a couple weeks ago at our dealer meetings, and he was just awarded Rookie of the Year from our dealer network. And I said, what is it that really attracted you to BW Fusion as a dealer? And I said, what's your favorite product? And I was asking everybody that. And his answer instantly was Meltdown was his favorite product. And the reason why Meltdown was his favorite product was it's something that his growers could, like I said, see, feel, and touch. He said the first growers that he had doing trials where they were spraying parts of field and not spraying other parts of fields where he said, it was as simple as he was driving his pickup truck across a cornstalk field, with the following spring, And if you've ever, and I think everybody on this webinar has done it, you drive a pickup truck or a side-by-side or a four-wheeler across corn stalks, it sounds like they're trying to tear the bottom out of the underneath side of your vehicle. And he said that grower instantly knew when he had driven into that meltdown applied area of the field because it got quiet, because those stalks were just snapping off, right? And so, it may be something anecdotal, but at the same time, it's telling us, it's that see, feel, and touch on that residue breaking down and becoming less of a problem for us in subsequent years. So, what are some meltdown benefits? Returning key nutrients, and we've talked about this, like organic nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and carbon back to the ground faster, improving soil health and increasing yield potential. So, that's a huge key right now because of what fertilizer prices are doing. So we're going to lower that spend on fertilizer. I don't think that's something that's getting taken into account in a lot of fertility plans, but it absolutely should be because that crop took up more nutrients than what it needed in the grain, and it's in the residue. We give that back, and we have the ability to cycle that nutrition back through that soil again and make it available for the next crop. Can we increase yields? Absolutely. When we increase carbon, we increase biological activity. When we increase biological activity, we also cycle nutrients better. There's a slide that I talk about. I can't believe that we didn't put it in this slide deck, but there's a slide I talk about, and every time I talk about a plant and soil synergy, that the plant feeds the soil feeds the plant, and a lot of that is predicated upon that WEOC, that water extractable organic carbon I talked about earlier, as a food source for biology. The plant also creates sugars for that biology, and we cycle those nutrients. It acts as an affordable soil enhancer that can be easily applied fall or spring. And I think that's a big one. Ideally, we're going to apply Meltdown in the fall, hopefully as close to behind the combine as possible. But in the event that we can't make those fall applications, we can still see benefit in the spring from a soil enhancer, from priming that soil from that biological perspective. And then diversify soil makeup. Obviously, we're including nutrients that the soil may be deficient in. By releasing some of those back, we're increasing the biological diversity of the soil. We are making that soil. In fact, a lot of growers say that when they've used Meltdown for subsequent years, or maybe 3 or 4 years, or can be different for different folks or different systems, but you feel like the soil gets softer when you walk across it. And it's because there's 2 things that really do that. It's calcium and carbon. And the more carbon we put back in that soil, the softer that soil becomes. We add tilth to that soil. More benefits. We release carbon for your crop, again, improving health and performance. We're breaking down that crop residue naturally. Let's be honest. Tillage tools, tillage points, tillage disc blades, fuel are all things that are expensive. We break down those residues using naturally occurring microbes that have been isolated for a specific job. So I feel fairly strongly that this statement of even potentially eliminating tillage passes is a legitimate experience. I'm in Southeast Illinois. We start corn harvest. Corn harvest has been going on here now because of the warm summer and early planting in some areas. We started harvest corn and beans here the last week of August. So corn harvest has been going on in some areas locally almost 3 weeks now. And as we chase that combine out of the field with those sprayers making Meltdown passes, for those folks that are getting, working towards getting ground prepped to plant winter wheat here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, this is even an area where I've confidently felt that we've saved passes in the past, because with these warm temperatures, morning dews, hopefully maybe a potential hurricane rain coming in here, tropical storm rain coming in here the next couple of days, we're breaking that residue down faster because we're applying it while we still have warm temperatures. The longer that we can have that Meltdown on in the fall, the more we break down that residue. And come spring, I have complete confidence that for those folks that no-till soybeans, behind corn stalks will have no issue planting right through that residue with minimal effort. And it says here, makes it less likely the stalks will damage equipment. And I obviously, realize that the true damage is probably minimal, but tires are a big one, and tires are expensive too. If those stalks just pop out of the way, then we don't have to worry about corn stalks, tearing the lugs and things like that off of tires. Improves palatability and promotes stand optimization and reduces hairpinning. We've got several instances where we're tracking, these planters now, they've got sensors for everything. And I've seen several, trials where guys have taken Meltdown with and without in a field. And then the following spring as they're planting, watching their downforce maps. And so taking that plantability, being promoted and stand optimization. What we mean by that is that planter unit can ride so much better when we're not dealing with that residue. We're not balling up and we're not dragging up and we're not having our row units bouncing over that residue as it's clumped up. The soil tends to dry better. And when our disc openers go through the field, it slices through that residue instead of hair pinning it down into the seed trench. So absolutely an improvement in plantability is a direct opportunity. And it says here, gives you the benefit of planting a cover crop without the extra expense and the work of planting a cover crop. And, that may seem kind of silly, on face value, but if we're keeping, if we're pumping the carbon into the soil, if we're stimulating the biology in the soil, we're doing some of those things. I'm not saying that that's the same thing as a cover crop. Cover crops with roots do so many different things, but there's benefits that Meltdown brings that are very similar. Kind of a bridge the gap for those folks that firmly believe that cover crops don't work in their environment. I think that the soil priming ability, the increase in the biology, and some of those things are those benefits that Meltdown brings when a cover crop doesn't fit any particular system. So what are the top 5 tangibles of using Meltdown? Apply in the fall and be amazed by the transformation in the spring. This is what I was talking about. The sooner we follow that combine, and there's a lot to this. There's reasoning for this. Meltdown has food source in that product to stimulate those microbes and get the microbe colonizing as it goes into the fall and into the winter. But the other thing that we think about is as these stalks and these crops are healthier at harvest time, there's still sugars in those stalks. There's still sugar that's trapped in that residue that was created by those plants. And those microbes in Meltdown are going to use those sugars as a food source. And we're going to stimulate those microbes faster. They're going to get to work faster. They're going to break down that residue quicker. Soil health benefits. There are clear before and after differences based on our Agronomy 365 nutrient data. And what this means is we have traditionally gone out soil testing, doing different things, looking at our soil health values that we measure through Agronomy 365 to determine the added value of Meltdown beyond just residue management. I talked about this. Planting next season will be smoother. Plant precisely where we want, in the depth we want, with more control over our planter because it's not bouncing over tough crop residue. I talked about that on the last slide. We've got lots of data, of downforce data where the planter ride is smoother. You talk to anybody that's interested or works in the precision planting type realm, they'll tell you that the downforce is the most important planter additive that they're putting on these machines now. It's because consistent seed depth is important for even germination and emergence. It's something that Meltdown helps to do in improving that seed, that's that plantability in that seed bed. And then again, benefits of a cover crop, like I talked about, you get a boost in soil health without planting and harvesting that crop if that's something that doesn't fit into your system. So I got a case study here that we're going to look at. And basically, it says that residue management is equal to planting efficiency with better yields and a better ROI. So let's dive into that here. This was done in Northwest Iowa with an independent firm. The data speaks for itself here. This independent research firm analyzed 2 cornfields Oops, I'm clicking the wrong button. Here we go. That had treated versus untreated meltdown areas. The consistent use of the BW Fusion biologicals unleashed the availability of phosphorus and potassium, bringing significant cost savings while protecting crop productivity. And essentially what this is showing is in two different fields, the release of both phosphorus and potassium differences after continued use of meltdown. And this isn't, terribly hard to wrap our minds around. I'm going to use my words, I guess, to try to tell this story. But I think we all appreciate the fact that there's far more nutrients in PK, whatever, in our soil than what a traditional soil test would tell us is available. And so we call that the total pool of nutrients. And when you pull a soil test like an Indicator Max from Agronomy 365, where you're measuring the total pool of nutrients and a traditional extractable pool of nutrients and a plant available pool of nutrients, what we see is what the crop has access to and what's actually there are oftentimes significantly different. But it's biological activity in our soils that continues that cycle of keeping that nutrient moving, making more of those nutrients available. So it goes to reason that as we supply, nutrient or microbes into the soil that break down complex carbons, that release nutrients, putting more of those nutrients in that plant available form for our crop. So we see that with both P and K. Obviously, you see a difference from field to field. And I think some of that has to do with the amount of carbon. I think some of that has to do with, the WEOC that's available, the food source that's available for the microbes. And it has to do with historical practices, weather, water, things of that nature. We're not going to see the same nutrient release in every field. But what we're showing from here is that we do see differences and we do see gains in nutrient release. So when we take that and think about it from a perspective of those two fields at today's fertility value, we see almost a $250 an acre increase in available nutrients in the first field and over $100 of increased available nutrients in the second field. So it's a way that we can take a product like Meltdown, a tool like Agronomy 365, and fine tune our nutrient release values again to more easily account for the value of the nutrients that our soils have and can be provided. And I think that's a huge piece. So residue, revenue, repeat. Let's put Meltdown to work. 10 years of data. We've been utilizing Meltdown for over a decade now on millions of acres. To do just this, to break down residues, to make planting simpler, to make fields easier to plant in the spring, and to release nutrients. And 64% of our independent research determined that BW Meltdown generated an increased value of over 64% based on the case studies that we just talked about. And when using Meltdown, nutrient release and efficiency is up to 68% greater than traditional dry fertilizer. And what that's really comparing to, is there's a lot of university data out there. I think these are the things that we start to pay attention to in scenarios like we are now, where a lot of our universities have said over the years that for every $100 we spend, especially in the case of something like phosphorus, that we're lucky to get $10 to $30 of that back in that subsequent year. And so when you think about spending $100 an acre going into 2025 to get a $10 to only get 10 to 30 of that back, that seems like a bad investment with commodity prices being what they are. So, the last thing I really had was to kind of do a shameless plug here for our podcast. It's called the Cropcast. You can find it on Apple. You can find it on Spotify. We wanted to make it our leading agronomy podcast in the nation. We want to empower growers with cutting edge tactics and expert insights. And the reason I bring up the podcast is if you want more information about Meltdown, we recently did an episode where we focused a little bit deeper dive into Meltdown as well. So you can check that out if you want more information about Meltdown. So kind of recapping here. I love this turn residue into revenue piece. We're reclaiming nutrients. We're lowering the cost of the fertilizer spend. And when we improve plantability, when we improve seeding depth and do these different things, we increase yields as well. And so let's turn residue into revenue. And that's what I have for Meltdown.
All right, thanks, Sean. Great presentation. We've already had a couple of questions come through. Before we get to those, I just want to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, go ahead and mouse over the bottom of your screen there. There's a Q&A icon. You can go ahead and type your question, and we'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next little bit. The first question I saw is actually just a logistics question that I would like to answer. I had someone say they had to take a phone call. They missed part of the presentation. They're wondering how they can watch this later on. And so just another reminder that you can find the full presentation on no-tillfarmer.com. It should be up in about 48 hours from now, but you will also get an email with that link sent directly to you if you were registered for the webinar. So just wanted to clarify that. All right, so let's get to some content questions. This one, Sean says, how fast will I start to see the effects of Meltdown, and how fast will the soil absorb these nutrients?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think obviously that depends, right? I think that's the simple answer. And the reason I say that is, some of that depends on the weather conditions, right? If we make our Meltdown applications, and I guess I should give a kind of a wider range of a recommendation to maybe tie that in as well. We generally recommend Meltdown anytime our ambient temperature is above, say, 40-45 degrees for 48, 72 hours. That's warm enough for the biology to colonize, right? So maybe depending on your area, that could be after, making applications after Halloween or going in towards Thanksgiving or something like that. And if that's the case, obviously we may not see that activity until the spring, whereas if I get out there, like I said, here in Southeast Illinois or point south where it's warmer and we tend to stay warmer deeper into the fall, I can make an application today and realistically 3 weeks from now really start to see some breakdown as I go out there and start to work with that residue. But I think it's important to note that even for folks, in the north, like got some pictures from a presentation I was doing yesterday from one of our partners in North Dakota, and it was pictures of him out there last winter under the snow, digging through the snow, finding residue, and you could still see that residue was going away. Right. So it's just a matter of, are you going to see it driving down the road at 50 miles an hour? Probably not. When you get out in the field and do that, like I said, that see field touch, depending on your situation and where you are, you could see it faster. Another thing is, I talked about chasing the combine. Some folks, whether you have a set of stock stompers or maybe a devastator type deal on your corn head, if you open up that residue, maybe you do run, say, a vertical tillage pass right after the combine, or some people run, a bush hog or a flail mower through their residue, from a tire perspective. If you open up that residue, you have more entry sites for the biology when they're applied. So you could see much faster breakdown if that's the case as well.
All right, got another one here. This is kind of a two-parter. The question is, how long will Meltdown continue to work when applied in the fall? And then the same user has a follow-up just kind of related to cover crop breakdown in the spring, making nutrients available for cash crops.
Sure. Okay. So we for sure will see, if it applied in the fall, you will continue to see it continually through the spring, right? So it's not that I'm going to say that you apply Meltdown in the fall of 24, and as you go into the fall of 25, that those microbes are there and they're going to start breaking down, the 25 residue. Again, the microbes have to be on that residue. They remain in the soil, they remain to colonize, et cetera. But like say a fall application now is going to be continually working on that residue through, into the next spring. Speaking to like cover crop breakdown, several folks have done that. I think the one thing to point out is Meltdown can even be applied, say, post emergence within a crop, because it doesn't break down green tissue, right? So there's no fear, if you have some cover crops. Let's say for example, I'm just going to use, say, rye for an example, as a rye cover crop, and someone may go in and no-till beans into a rye cover crop. Once the beans are established, they kill off that rye. Well, you could apply the Meltdown in that burn down pass. It's not going to go to work on that rye until that rye is dead, but it's going to continue to break it down, whereas that growing crop of soybeans are not going to be affected by it because they're green and living. So maybe that kind of answers that question a little bit.
All right. And then while we're kind of talking about fall versus spring, this question is, if I have to apply Meltdown in the spring instead of this fall, what is the recommended time frame to apply it before I plant?
Sure. That could be anytime. That could be anytime. Again, once we get into that period where our temperatures are 40 plus and warming, we can absolutely make that pass. Let's say, and it obviously depends on where you are, but around here, I could conceivably be out there mid-February, make a pass, and I know I'm probably not going to plant that until hopefully early April, but late April. I could still see residue degradation benefits because I've had it out there as that continued to warm. But I think a lot of times when we think about it from a spring application, we still see the residue breakdown benefits, but I don't know that in the spring, I don't know if I can make a recommendation that it's going to greatly enhance your plantability, just based upon the amount of time that we have to work in, if that makes sense. That's where you're kind of looking at that nutrient release and soil priming effects and some of that when we apply it in that springtime.
And then staying on topic, another attendee wondering, would a fall application reduce volunteer corn in next season's soy?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I got to be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. Conceivably, could Meltdown use that volunteer corn as a food source, and thereby breaking down that waxy layer of that kernel, and potentially aiding in that not germinating next year? Conceivably, that's a possibility. I just don't have the data set today to say that, yeah, you'll see a reduction in volunteer corn the next year. I feel like that's kind of akin to, if we break down residue, will we lower a disease cycle, in the following year? And again, I think the answer is kind of the same. Is I don't know that I think if we work to destroy a host, then yes, we would limit some disease cycle. We could potentially limit some volunteer corn, but I don't know that I'm willing to. That's not a hill that I'm going to die on today, so to speak, as far as from a volunteer corn perspective.
Sean, I had a couple questions, just kind of asking about availability as far as like where people are located. So this person was wondering if it's available in British Columbia. I had another person actually asking if it's available in Ghana. Maybe if you could just touch on kind of availability for a moment.
I don't know about Ghana. Obviously, that's let's see, Ghana's in South America, right? Am I thinking that correctly? So I think I think Biodyne has some partners down there that maybe could get access. As far as outside of the United States, say Canada, I think we also have some partners up there. I don't believe BW Fusion directly sells in Canada, but there are some partners. I would say for questions such as that, I would call into our office or go online at bw-fusion.com, send out an information request, kind of email through the website, and those questions could be answered by the staff there at the office for sure.
Yep, I was going to say we'll be sure to try and connect, get some answers for those folks. All right, moving on. I had another attendee say they watched a video that said the longer and the more seasons you apply Meltdown, the more benefits you'll see, and they're just kind of wondering if you can explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And we've got, especially I'd love to tag in one of our sales partners up in Iowa, gentleman that's been selling Meltdown for, I think he hangs his hat on Meltdown for over a decade now, and it's one of the things that his name's Bob Wagner out there, and he talks about this a lot. That it's not a one and done thing. The more we apply, and essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to change that soil as you go, right? You're trying to make that soil health, and soil health is, when we think about that, when we see those benefits in the soil, I think with everything, somewhat soil health related, is we don't see the benefits instantly. We don't instantly change the direction, of our soils. Same from a fertility perspective. If as you start to cycle more nutrients, we don't change our dependence on things overnight. It's a bit of a process. And so I think what that means is essentially is the longer we use Meltdown, again, the more carbon release. And I talked about that. You feel that soil becoming softer because we're putting more carbon in that. Again, with that measurement, that WEOC that I mentioned a couple of times in there, that's kind of our, we take this indicator max soil test that tells us all these soil health plus our total nutrients and our extractable nutrients. There's 75 plus metrics on that soil test, and maybe the flagship metric is what we call the CSAT, or WEOC divided by CEC. And honestly, that's the number I'm trying to move, because the higher I take that WEOC divided by CEC, I know that my soil's becoming healthier, and the more nutrients I have, the ability to cycle within that system.
All right, and then I think you touched a little bit on this in your presentation, but from a phosphorus perspective, how does Meltdown release phosphorus better than, say, any other competitive products?
Sure, and I think that's a great question, because what I'll say is, what Meltdown is phenomenal with is breaking down those nutrients that are within our residue, right? And that's the part that is easy to wrap our mind around. Meltdown has got phosphorus solubilizing microbes within that technology, but I would say, from that perspective, I know this is a Meltdown webinar, but if we are really focused on phosphorus release and other nutrient release from the soil, Meltdown's a great tool. But our products such as BioCast Max, which is a combination of our 401 team of biology and Meltdown, or our BioCast or 401, those are products that we really focus on from a phosphorus release perspective. And we use a lot of those in the spring and throughout the growing season, because we want to release that phosphorus kind of to that growing season. So, I think Meltdown is, if we're doing good, better, best, Meltdown is excellent at residue. It's excellent at releasing those nutrients from the residue. It's good at releasing nutrients from the soil. But if you want a full-on approach of soil nutrient release, pairing Meltdown with that 401 BioCast team is our best bang for getting that phosphorus release.
All right, and then another one here. If they apply it really especially late in the fall, will Meltdown still function in that spring?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. It's just like I said, it's a matter of just watching those ambient air temperatures, and I don't want you to put it's a microbe, right? They're not going to freeze out and die per se, but it's a matter of trying to get, you want those microbes to bloom, to colonize, right? So I want to take the millions of microbes that are in, every droplet of Meltdown, and I want to take that and turn those into billions of microbes, right? So I want to go from millions to billions and so on. And so the better the weather forecast is, the better the weather is, the better that we have the ability to get that growth, to get that explosion of that biology. And so, yes, you'll still see benefit. Absolutely. But if we go out there and the ground's frozen and it's 10 degrees outside, we're not going to be as successful with that product as we would if we're, 40, 50, 60, 70 degrees when we make that application and for that period of time afterwards.
All right, and then someone asking you to remind them of the rate to apply Meltdown.
That's a great question, because I didn't answer that question while we were talking. So Meltdown is an easy one. We apply it at a quart. So it's a quart per acre use rate. Generally, application recommendations are fairly simple. Whatever carrier volume you're comfortable with. I say this a lot. Coverage is key. And I'm a huge believer that we don't have to have 20-gallon of water to get good coverage. In fact, I think it's a product that, because there's so many things going on in the fall that we're trying to accomplish with harvest and grain handling and whatever, all the other things that go with that I oftentimes will tell guys, if you've got nozzles on your sprayer that will give you phenomenal coverage at 5-10 gallon to the acre, by all means do it. Because if I can go out there at a lower carrier volume, accomplish good coverage, I can spray twice as many acres in a load as I can if I'm spraying it at 20 gallon the acre. So I think that's a huge deal. If you can get good coverage at lower volume, then by all means, do that. General recommendation for me is 10-gallon, but if you've got the nozzles to do it, we could go to 8 or something like that and try to increase that acre load to get that product out there.
All right, here's an interesting one. Question is, will a tillage pass after application minimize the results?
Also, another great question that I didn't address in there, and I think that's a really good one. So here's kind of a general rule of thumb, and like I think I did mention the idea of maybe if you do it like a vertical tillage pass beforehand, and open that stock up, that's great. Even a vertical tillage pass afterwards, I'd like to see just safely 72 hours before a tillage pass, and again, let that biology colonize, let that bloom happen, let it expand before we go chop that up. And that's from like a shallow tillage, a vertical tillage perspective. When it comes to deep tillage, if you're going out there with a chisel plow or a ripper and you're planning on turning that dirt over, honestly, I'd like to see, I think it could be earlier, but in a perfect scenario, give it a week. If you're going deep tillage, realistically, and I don't think anybody would love this, I'll settle for a week pre-tillage, but in a perfect world, if we're going to get pretty aggressive with tillage, I'd like to see the tillage made and then the sprayer pass happen. But that's, the likelihood of a guy wanting to go out there and get the sprayer out there and beat across a chisel plowed field, probably pretty minimal for take on that. So.
All right, had another one just come through. Is water pH of mixture critical when applying Meltdown, would you say?
Meltdowns, these biology are pretty tough. I'm not going to tell you that, obviously in a perfect scenario, I'd like to see something in the, mid sixes, something like that. A lot of water I know is, there's a lot of well water that gets used on the farm that's, 7-8 pH. Really like to see that number come down, but also don't necessarily want to be out there at, like we are with a lot of foliar products trying to be at 4 and 5, So somewhere in that 5 to 7, I think would be ideal. But it's not that's not a hill that I'm prepared to die on. As long as your water's just not terrible, you're going to be successful.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for those great questions. Had a lot of them. That's always good to see. And then Sean, thanks for some good answers there. And of course, if you think of any other questions, as Sean mentioned, you can, of course, go online, call the number, reach out to us, and we'll make sure we get an answer for you. So with that, just want to thank everyone again for joining us today. Reminder one more time, you'll be able to rewatch this presentation on no-tillfarmer.com or just check your email. Should be available about 48 hours after the conclusion today. And on behalf of BW Fusion and No-Till Farmer, just want to say thanks again. And you can always feel free to reach out to us with other recommendations of webinar ideas you'd like to see. So I think that's it for today. Thanks again, everyone.